when I was 18 years old. I saw for the first time in my life, I saw an image of clarity. I saw a comic strip, a 3-panel comic strip that, though simple as it seemed, changed me, changed my being, changed who I am, made me who I am, enlightened me. The strip, Garfield's. The comic strip was new, no more than maybe a month and a half since inception, since coming to existence, and there it was before me in print. I saw it, a comic strip. What was it called? Garfield. The story here is of a man, a plain man. He is John, but he is more than that. I will get to this later, but first let us say that he's John, a plain man. And there is a cat, Garfield. This is the nature of the world here. When I see the world, the politics, the future, the satellites in space, and the people who put them there, you can look at everything as a man and a cat. Two beings in harmony and at war. So the strip I saw, this man, John, and the cat, Garfield. You see, yes, it's about everything. This little comic is, lo and behold, not so little anymore. So yes, when I was 18, I saw this comic, and it hit me all at once, its power. I clipped it, and every day I looked at it and I said, okay, let me look at this here. What is this doing to me, and why is it so powerful? John Arboggle, he sits here, legs crossed, comfortable in his home, and he reads his newspaper, the news of the world perhaps, and then he extends his fingers lightly, delicately. He taps his fingers on an end table, and he feels for something. What is it? It's something he needs, but it's not there. And then he looks up slightly cockeyed, and he thinks, his newspaper's in his lap now, and he thinks this, now where could my pipe be? This, I always come to this because I was a young man at once. I'm older now, and I still don't have the secrets, the answers, so this question still rings true. John looks up and he thinks, now where could my pipe be? And then it happens, you see, it's almost like divine intervention. Suddenly, it's there, and it overpowers you. The cat is smoking a pipe. It is the man's pipe, it's John's pipe, but the cat, this cat, Garfield, is smoking the pipe, and from afar, someplace near, but not clear, near, but not clear, the man calls out. John calls out. He is shocked. Garfield! He shouts. Garfield. The cat's name. But let's take a step back. Let's examine this from all sides, all perspectives. And when I first came across this comic strip, I was at my father's house. A newspaper had arrived, and I picked it up for him and brought it inside. I organized the sections for him, and then yes, the comic strip section fell out from somewhere in the middle and landed on the kitchen floor. I picked up the paper pages and saw somewhere near the top of the strip, just like John, I was wearing an aquamarine shirt, so I thought, interesting, I'll have to see this later. I snipped out the little comic and I held on to it. And 5 days later, I finally examined it, re-examined it, and it gripped to me. I needed to find out more about this. The information I had was minimal, but enough. An orange cat named Garfield. Okay, that seemed to be the linchpin of this whole operation. Yes, another clue. A signature in the bottom right corner. A man's name. Jim Davis. Yes, I'm on it. I'm onto it for sure. So 1, Garfield, orange cat. And 2, Jim Davis, the creator of this cat, and that curiously plain man. I did not know at the time that his name was John. The strip you see had no mention of this man's name, and I had never seen it before, but I had these clues: Jim Davis and Garfield. And then I saw more. I spotted the tiny copyright mark in the upper left corner. Copyright 1978 to... what is this? Copyright belongs to a Pause Incorporated. I used the local library and the mail services at the time to track down the information I was looking for. Jim Davis, a cartoonist, had created a comic strip about a cat, Garfield, and the man, John Arbuckle. Well, from that point on, I made sure I read these strips. Though as I read each one, as each day passed, the strips seemed to resonate with me less and less. I sent letters to Pause Incorporated, long letters, pages upon pages, asking if Mr. Jim Davis could somehow publish just the one comic, over and over again. It would be meditative, I wrote, the strength of that. Could you imagine? But no response. The strips lost their power, and eventually I stopped reading, but I do not want my perceptions diluted. So I vowed to read the pipe strip over and over again. That's what I call it now. The pipe strip. The pipe strip. Everything about it is perfect. I can only describe it as a miracle creation. Something came together. The elements aligned. It's like the comets, the cosmic orchestra that is up there over your head. The immense, enormous void is working all for one thing, to tell you one thing. Gas and rock and purity and nothing. I will say this, when I see the pipe strip, and I mean every single time I look at the lines, the colors, the shapes that make up the 3-panel comic, I see perfection. Some things, well, I would say some things are perfect, and this is one of them. I can look at the little tuft of hair on John Arbuckle's head. It's the perfect shade. The purple pipe in Garfield's mouth. How could a mere mortal even make this? So I have a theory about Jim Davis. After copious research, and yes, of course, now we have the internet, and this information is all readily available, but Jim Davis, he used his life experiences to influence this comic. Like I mentioned before, none of them have seemed to have the weight of the pipe strip. But you have to wonder about the man who is able to even once create the perfect form, a literally flawless execution of art and brilliance. Just as in a word, I think there's some spiritual elements at work. I've seen my share of bad times, and when you have something, well, it's just emotions and neurons in your brain, but something tells you that it's the truth. Truth's radiant light. Garfield the cat? Neurons in my brain, it's harmony, you see. John and Garfield, it's truly harmony, like continuous, looping, everlasting harmony. The lavender chair, the brown end table, the salmon-covered wall, the floor's green carpeting. Garfield is hunched, perched, perhaps with the pipe stuck firmly between his jowls. His tail curls around. It's more than shapes, too. Because okay, stay with me. I've done this experiment several times. Takes the strip. You trace only the basic elements. You can do anything. You can simplify the shapes down to just blobs, outlines. But it still makes sense. You can replace the blobs with magazine cutouts of other things. Replace John Arbuckle with a car, parked in the driveway sideways. Cut that out of a magazine, stick it in. Replace him there at the second panel with a food processor. And when we get the picture of the planet in the third panel over at Garfield, it still works. These are universal proportions. I don't know how best to explain why it works. I've studied the pipe strip and analyzed John and Garfield's proportions against several universal mathematical constants. E, pi, the golden ratio, the Feigenbaum constants, and so on. It's surprising, even scary, how things align. You can just take tiny pieces of the pipe strip, for instance. take John's elbow from the second panel and take that and project it back over John's entire shape for the second panel, and you'll see a near perfect Fibonacci sequence emerge. It's eerie to me, and it makes you wonder if you're in the presence of a deity, if there is some larger hand at work. I mean, there's no doubt in my mind that Jim Davis is a smart man. Jim Davis is capable of anything to me. He's remarkable, but this is so far beyond that, and I think we might see that this work is revered and respected in years to come. Jim Davis is possibly a new master of the craft, a genius of the eye. They very well may say the same things about Jim Davis in 500 years that we say about the great philosophical and artistic masters from centuries ago. He's a modern-day Socrates, Da Vinci, mixing both striking visual beauty with classical, daring, unheard-of intellect. Look, he combines these things to make profoundly simple expressions. This strip is a masterpiece. The pipe strip is his masterpiece. And it is a masterpiece and a marvel. I often look at Garfield's particular pose in the strip. He is poised, statuesque, and his cat stares, reminiscent of the fiery gazes often found in religious iconography. But still, his eyes are playful, lying somewhere between the solemn father's expression in Rembrandt's Return of the Prodigal Son and the coy smirk of Da Vinci's St. John the Baptist. His ears stick up, signifying a piqued readiness. It's as if he could at any moment pounce. He is, after all, a close relative and descendant of the mighty jungle cats of Africa that could leap after play. You could see the power drawn into Garfield's hindquarters. Powerful haunches indeed. The third panel. And I'm just saying this now, this is just coming to me now. The third panel of the pipe strip is essentially a microcosm for the entire strip itself. All of the power dynamics, the struggle for superiority, right? Who has the pipe? Where? Where is the pipe? All of that is drawn, built, and layered into Garfield's iconic pose here. You can see it in the curl of his tail. Garfield's ear whiskers stick up on end. The smoke billows upward, drawing the eye upward, increasing the scope, and I am just amazed, really, that after 33 years of reading and analyzing the same comic strip, I'm able to find new dimensions. It's a testament to the work. For 6 years, I also delved into tobacco research because can a cat smoke? This is a metaphysical question. Yes, can any cat smoke? Do we know? Can just Garfield smoke? The research says no. Nicotine poisoning can kill animals, especially household pet. All it takes is the nicotine found in as little as a single cigarette. Surely, John's pipe holds a substantial amount of tobacco, and it's true that pets living in the homes of smokers are nearly 25% more likely to develop cancer of some sort, most likely due to secondhand smoke, but these are facts of smoking its tolls on our world. But after visiting 2 tobacco processing plants in Virginia, in a Philip Morris cigarette manufacturing facility, I came no closer to cracking down on the meaning. I was looking for any insight. A detective of a homicide case has to look at every angle, so I'm always taking apart the pipe strip. I focused on every minutia, every detail of the strip. John's clothing, I have wrecked with this. I'm an expert in textiles, so you see this smoking thing was a hang-up for me. But it was the statement here until, well, this is key. This is the breakthrough. The pipe. It's not a pipe, really. Obviously there's symbolism at work here. I saw that from the beginning, and I looked at the literal aspects of the strip to gain insight into the metaphors at play. I worked at a newspaper printing press for 18 months in the late 1980s. I was learning the literal to inform the gestural, subliteral, the in-between. John, reading this newspaper, means so much more than just, well, John, reading the newspaper, but how could you ever hope to decipher the puzzle without knowing everything there is to know about newspapers? Okay, for example, John holds his newspaper up with his left thumb gripping the interior. I learned that this particular grip here is the newspaper grip of 19th century aristocrats, and this aristocrat grip was a point of contention that influenced the decision to move forward with prohibition in the US in the early 20th century. So John's hand position is much more than that. It's a comment on class war and the resulting reactionary culture that we have today. But I didn't know about the aristocratic newspaper grip until I came across some microfiche archives at the printing press. It's about information, and you had to take it apart, of course. And the breakthrough on the smoking cat came late, just 8 years ago exactly. Smoking cat is an industry term. It's what the smoking industry calls a tattletale teenager who tells on his friends after they've all tried smoking for the first time. And it's actually a foreign translation, a bastardization of the term smoking rat. But the phrase was confused when secret documents went back and forth between China and America. These documents are still secret, and the only reason I know about the term is because I know a man, my friend. Let's call him Timothy. Yes, it's a fake name for his protection. He worked for Philip Morris for 16 years, and he had seen the documents, and when he told me, it was an aha moment, and he said, "But how? How could this cartoonist, Jim Davis, know about this obscure term for the mid-70s, used exclusively by only a few cigarette companies? Well, this is still a mystery to me, but I connect the dots by noting Jim Davis's childhood experiences on the farm. He must have seen something. What could it be?" Timothy went on to tell me there was one particular smoking cat, a boy from, yes, Indiana, a boy named Ernie Barguckle, who became a thorn in the side of the tobacco companies for a couple of years. He did more than tattle to his parents. He and his family took legal action, and they eventually received a huge settlement. But that name is too familiar. It's too similar. Ernie Barguckle? John Arbuckle? Jim Davis must have used this. There's more to this. Ernie Barguckle spent nearly half of his settlement money on experimental medical procedures to cure his impotence. Yes, he was impotent. So, he was a smoking cat with a metaphorical pipe that, well, didn't work. So are you starting to see the layers here? This is exciting stuff. You start to see a whole picture here, and it informs the work, and it's just remarkable. Jim Davis took these raw ideas, these pieces, and he transformed them into a smart social commentary that is so ravishingly beautiful. I've cried all over this place. It just gets in my soul. And I try to explain this to people. I have the newspaper articles about Ernie. People have fought me on this. They don't see it, or they're closed-minded. How could this comic strip mean any more than just what it is? But it is more. And when I feel spiritual or start to think existentially, I still see this comic. There's something from 1981 that I wrote about in thinking about the implications of the strip, and this is just an excerpt here. There's more before and after, but this part is the essence to me. If a comic about a cat smoking a pipe can be the only thing in the universe, then maybe this is the strongest evidence for that. Here's the excerpt here. Many of you say, "Oh, but I am not blind. I have never been blind." But when you truly see, you understand just how many blind you once were to even think it right to say you were not blind. So what does a blind man see? blackness. Darkness, blankness, blank darkness, or dark blankness, the absence of things, quite literally no thing, no things, nothings. So you see nothing, and I bring you into the light. A cat has your pipe. You've been blinded. Don't you understand this? The cat has your pipe. You cannot fully immerse yourself. You do not have the light. You do not have the radiance, the radical light. The radically radiant light of truth, and truth's belonging love, and nature of light, and loving, truthful radiance. So don't be bold, and make bold statements. I know of you. The cat has your pipe. The cat has your pipe. Remember that. That writing, well, it's kind of rough, kind of a early 80s feel, and I see that, but I'm still proud of it. Sometimes I imagine that it's the editorial column in the newspaper John Arbuckle is reading. It's an exercise in recursion. It's like a vortex opens up. It's like you hold two mirrors up to each other. One is reality, and the other is a cartoon strip. Let's see here. Oh yes, I must bring this up because I think surely Jim Davis is again speaking on multiple levels by including the details set before us in the comic. Notice the glimpse of John Arbuckle's foot in the first panel. The size of the shoe would indicate that maybe the man just has small feet. But a deeper investigation takes us to the foot binding rituals of certain Asian cultures. Inflicted usually on women for the desire of men, this practice was incredibly painful and eventually crippling. Aha! Mr. Davis is here, presenting us with a man, or rather, man, who engages in foot binding, a body modification for women, on top of being without his pipe. Impotent. This is a man facing extreme inner turmoil. The panel tells that story subconsciously. Notice the background wall shading of the first panel points inward towards John in the second panel, and the sharp tapered end of the purple pipe in the third frame also points at John in the second panel, inward. The eye is drawn to the center panel. You can connect those points and draw a triangle across the panels, and this triangle with a line, it will align with the reoriented points of his collar. Now this is majestic work. And to uncover this hidden order is bliss like I've never known, comforting in an empty world. I can't help but read the thought bubble over and over again. Now, where could my pipe be? It's a profound question. Why am I here? What is my purpose? It is reflection and self-examination here. It's facing the dust, the misery of a cold, careless universe. You can feel the weight of it. But where could my pipe be? One imagines the author, Jim Davis, teetering on the edge of insanity, his rationality, his lucidity hovering over the void, and he seeks the truth. You can see it in the line quality of the drawings, the thoughtful, controlled outlines mixed with the occasional, chaotic scribbles at work in the shadows and in Garfield's dark stripes. It's almost as if Garfield is chaos himself. Yes, he is the embodiment of chaos, disorder, hatred, and fear, thievery, death, destruction, and desolations. These are the things Garfield represents because he stole the pipe. He sits with his back to John. Garfield, his chaos cat. He has turned his back on everything, everyone. One recalls the great existential forces in literature, Camus's Meursault, Kafka's Gregor Samsa, or Sartre's Antoine Roquentin. Garfield the cat sees the hopelessness of life, which, yes, this is why Jim Davis has chosen smoking. It represents a recklessness, a disregard for what some would define as the beauty of life. Garfield may die from the nicotine, he may not. He defies life. He sits defiant. saying nothing, but looking as if he could say, "Then let me die. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter." And here we are faced with this. Could John behave the same? Or is John the glimmer of hope? He seems to be unsure. Again, his question now, where could my pipe be, indicates that he's wrestling with his own existence. The center panel centers the issue and again harkens to many of the great religious works of art. I'm talking about the pipe strip in relation to religion. It's interesting to assign the roles of God and anti-God, or as many know him to be, the devil, or on a much larger scale, simply the forces of good and evil. Garfield, the thief cat, evil and malicious. He is the devil placed to the right. And note the two forms of John. The John on the left, still innocent, still draped in the delight of the lack of knowledge. He is the humans in the Garden of Eden. He feels for his pipe, but he has yet to eat from the tree. And Garfield, the sinister serpent, and notice how Jim Davis has framed this. The center John is locked in the struggle between his innocence and his knowledge of the truth, knowledge of the existence of evil. It is stunning. The great struggle, the struggle that transcends time. And Jim Davis floats all over this as a creator, the god of sorts in his own right. And he presents this cautionary message to us all as if he is speaking from high, and he is saying unto our awaiting ears, "Where will you be when the cat reveals himself?" Jim 7:27-28. 78, sorry. I can tell you where you'll be. You have a choice. You can face endless suffering and eternal misery. You can be forced and beaten down with barbarians who claw at each other just for a view of salvation. They'll tear your eyeballs out and rip your gizzards from end to end. They will worship this cat, this false idol, this evil, horrible cat. Do not be seduced by the cat and the pipe. Garfield, thy name is a mark of the demons of hell. Something like this, and to those listening, is a stark reminder to follow the path of the first panel, John. Be humble, be grateful, honor the law and thyself. Be true and be good, and no harm will come to you. Pray for salvation, and it will be granted unto you. Be like John Arbuckle as he lowers his head. Be like John Arbuckle as he lowers his paper and he turns his head. Bow with him and praise unto the Creator, Jim Davis, and banish the demon Garfield from your life. So what is all this? What am I saying? What does all this mean, right? Why is this one comic strip so important to me? And why do I feel the need to share this? Well, obligation. I have an obligation to y'all. This is a redemption. This is belief and redemption. A sacrifice of all the obvious trappings of this false modern life. Look at the simplicity in the strip, in the pipe strip. Look at the simple clothes he wears. John. Look at his simple, basic furniture. No adornments on the wall. Even the very pipe this cat stole. It's a plain, modest pipe. And I have adapted this way of life, and it speaks to me. In our times, well, you don't need me to point out the hyperbole of our times. You have children being born 8 or 9 at a time. You have more money being spent on a single Hollywood movie than some nations can spend feeding their starving people. Torture, distrust. Look around you and it is overwhelming. So, well, what can you contribute? And every day, I look in the mirror, and I hold this comic up to the mirror, and I look into the mirror, and at this little strip. Be humble. Be thankful. It is a reminder to be respectful. You are a statue. You are fragile. And when you break, when you shatter, where will all those pieces go? Ask. Ask this question. Will you ask this question? Humankind is only as great as you. You, the individual. It begins and ends with you. You must treat this expedition, this search, this life with a reverence and intensity found only in the smallest sticks, the smallest leaf, the tiniest stone, the most minuscule grain of sand on a beach of billions. This is the secret. Do you want the pipe? Do you want to know where the pipe has gone? You ask yourself. You ask. You ask. You ask. Now where could my pipe be? When I was a young man, I remember now, when I first saw this comic strip, when I was 18 years old, ages ago, but I was youthful, vibrant. For weeks I didn't hide that a comic strip was having such a profound effect on me. I was much like John in this middle panel. He says, now where can my pipe be? You could look into his eyes, his half-lowered eyes, and think to yourself, now, surely, John, surely you couldn't be this naive. This is nothing new for you. And if you read more of the Garfield comic strips by Jim Davis, you understand what I'm saying now. Garfield does things like this all the time. He will take things from John. Food, items, anything. This is his very nature. So you see this and you want to say, John, come on now. You are lying to yourself. You are lying to yourself and to all of us. If you pretend to have not any idea of where your pipe has gone, perhaps you think you've left it somewhere else, but you're not so forgetful. You are lying to yourself. Yes. John Arbuckle, you are lying to yourself. You know that Garfield has the pipe. Somewhere. Deep down you know this. You don't even need to think the question. And that was me when I saw the strip. 1 week passed, and each morning I'd open my drawer and slam it shut again. I would go to look at the comic, but I'd pause and think, oh no, I don't need this comic. I don't need to look at it. But there I was, lying to myself. I did need to see it, and well, so I did. It's cathartic. You give in, and that is the transition from the second panel of life to the third. It is a simple story architecture, the passage from the second act to the third, the twilight of things. John gives in to his suspicions. He's known the truth. He always has, and he yells out, Garfield! Garfield! It's like a pressure from a steam valve being released. The buildup is over. It's unbearable, and then it's gone. So it's like this. When I speak about the truth, the light and that radiance, this is the kind of thing I'm talking about. This is the essence of this brilliant work of art, the practical mixing, meeting, agreeing with the spiritual. It's all here. But spirituality isn't an easy thing to confront. You might find yourself able to wrap your mind around a simple math problem or a basic newspaper article, but intellect, but this is much less subjective. What is spirituality, and how have I found spiritual peace and serenity in Garfield? A long time ago, after I encountered the pipe strip, I spent some time, as I mentioned before, soul-searching. When something impacts you or alters your very perception so greatly, there is a long period of confusion, recovery time. It's as if you don't know who you are, and that could be a very scary prospect, especially if you thought you had a good grasp on that sort of thing. Imagine if Jim Davis didn't know who he was. Would he be capable of shaping the cultural landscape as he's done? No. No, of course he wouldn't. And how about his characters? John. What if Jim suddenly woke up and didn't know who John was? What if he couldn't make the informed decisions to accurately depict his personality, or Garfield's personality, because he can no longer specify or demarcate the boundaries of Garfield's behavior? Now, what kind of comic would that be? You see? So to draw the parallel, I saw this comic and yes, I was disoriented. And if I didn't reconcile this issue of myself, what kind of person would I be? Undoubtedly dire circumstances, but remember, this wasn't a math problem. This wasn't an article. This isn't something I could just figure out. And as skeptical as I was, I realized that faith and spirituality are avenues that require a lot of exploring. At first I tried long nights reading Garfield by candlelight, or aromantic meditation settings, while thinking of Garfield, but nothing snapped, nothing clicked. I still felt lost, but I kept it up. I hired a shaman, a young professional yogi Sikh guru, Avram Dal Sikh Sahib. I pushed and pushed, determined to find myself. Well, then a miracle happened. Upon retrieving my morning paper to clip the Garfield comic, I noticed a young girl selling lemonade 2 houses down. She sat, occupied at her stand. She had no customers in sight. So I approached, and I saw what she was coloring. I looked at her drawing. 3 rectangular boxes. A man in a blue shirt. An orange cat. I knew what this was. Even in our crude scribbles, I knew exactly what this was. She was drawing a Garfield comic. I looked at her words and I saw that in her strip, John asked Garfield to retrieve a newspaper. Funny, since I'd done just that myself. Garfield is sarcastic, but he agrees to. He returns and he called John Sahib. John exclaims that the paper's all chewed up, and then Garfield says, and I quote, Sahib asks fish, paper is wet. Sahib asks cat, paper is holy. I remember the words and I ran back to my house and I thought, how odd that Sahib shows up in the strip. And my spiritual advisor's name is Avram Dab Singh Sahib. Coincidentally, surely, coincidence of course, but nonetheless I spent the next 16 hours poring through my clipped Garfield comics looking through the strip this young girl has been coloring. I couldn't find it, and I eventually fell asleep right on my kitchen table. Next morning I retrieved my paper again and I clipped the Garfield comic. The date was July 12, 1983, and there it was. The Sahib strip, in all its glory. The girl had been drawing the next day's strip, so I ran out of my house right back to where she was, but she's gone, and in place of the lemonade stand was a for sale sign. They'd moved out. I rushed back to my house to call Avram, but I was informed that he moved as well. I reeled for several hours, and then it all connected to me. It was all meant to be. It was meant to be this way. Jim, John, Garfield, it was always meant to be this way for me. They move to the forefront and everything else fades away. Everything else, the girl, the lemonade stand, Avram, it all existed to show me the way, and when I found it, everything else melted away. That was the beautiful miracle. And of July 27th, 1978, the day I first saw that pipe strip, was the first day of my life, then that day, July 12th, 1983, was the second day of my life. I've never looked back. Garfield has transformed me, and I am a man, born anew, because of Garfield. When I was in my mid-30s, I was interviewed for a documentary, and it was a documentary on the subject of cat behavior. Now, I've had cats all my life. I have 3 now, and at the time of this documentary interview, I had 4. I sat down for the interview, and I was joined by a veterinarian who specialized in felines. Dr. Caroline Willimitz was her name, I believe. And the doctor discussed colorblindness and how it affects their behavior. She specifically brought up the fact that cats are red-green colorblind. They can see colors, but they can't tell the difference between red and green. And look at the color choice in the strip. Garfield sits on a green floor behind a pinkish-red wall. I heard this, and so I immediately pulled a copy of the comic from my wallet to show to the doctor. I moved so fast, I'm sure I nearly scared her to death. I pointed at the newspaper and I said, like this. Look at this here, this cat, Garfield, he's colorblind. He must be. This must be the answer here, like this. As overexcited as I was, I managed to take in her response, and she said, yes, a cat in this room would be having a hard time differentiating the wall from the floor. Add that to a cat's known spatial confusion, and you have the makings of a cat rage room. Now, she informed me that this isn't exactly common knowledge among cat owners, but a seasoned cat owner, or someone particularly perceptive, will have picked up on it. So, what's incredible here is that not only is Garfield's behavior symbolic of the devil and all of the evil constructs in the world, but also it's rooted in science and scientific fact. Well, look at that. You can't spell fact without cat. Just a little joke there, just some wordplay. But getting back on track. Oh, can't spell track of that cat either. I digress. I'm just kidding around. It's established here that Garfield is in a rage. An ultimate rage of fury and hatred caused by color blindness. So now we know the what and the why. But let's examine the how. The how of this rage is particularly interesting here. We've looked at his posture and we've called it powerful and control, statuesque, etc. Composed rage. It's peculiar. And I've talked to a number of psychologists and psychiatrists, and even a couple of anger management therapists about this concept. Could we see the same kind of behavior in a human? Is Garfield representative of something more specific than just chaos and rage? Deciphering this is going to take some perseverance for sure. The psychologists pointed to a phenomenon in humans. And yes, I believe one of the anger management counselors brought up as well. The idea that people oftentimes will bottle up their rage. So, Garfield here, he could be bottling his anger inside, shoving it deep into his cat gut, to ignore and deal with it at a later time. No, that's not exactly right. Garfield has already acted out. He's already stolen the pipe and he's smoking it. So he's already dealt with his anger. He's already lashed out, so psychologically, what's going on here? What is this cat doing? And how does this impact his owner, John, psychologically? Well, Garfield's angry. He's acting out on his owner, but is this passive or aggressive anger? It's passive. It's passive because if Garfield had a problem with John specifically, he's choosing a very passive way of dealing with it. He has not confronted him and said, "John, I have a problem with the way you've decorated this room. As a cat, I am colorblind and this room sends me into a rage. You created a rage room for me here and I don't like it. I want you to change it." So instead of that confrontational approach, he's chosen to steal his pipe. And that in turn angers John. But John decides to be aggressively angry and yell at Garfield. So now, instead of a calm conversation between John and two respectful parties, you have two heated, angry individuals, each with a problem and no direct line of solving it. The layered emotions here tells a story with tight focused brevity that could make Hemingway weep. This is an entire drama in just 3 panels, people. But let's not be remiss and miss the humor of the situation, the absurdity of it all. For certainty, there is a reason that this visual shorthand for drama includes both the crying but a laughing mask. Comedy and tragedy complement each other and meld together to create drama, tension, at the height of humanity, the peak of art that reflects back to us our own condition. And here, in its basis form, we can laugh at this comic, yes, comic, in which a cat smokes a pipe. When was the last time you've seen such a thing in your life? Never, I presume. I certainly never have. The Greek muse Thalia, her presence is strong in this work of art. Here, comedy. And if it's comedy, if you look at the structure again, you will see that this is a perfect form of thirds, working magically for the transmission of, yes, a joke. The joke is as old as time. Even cavemen told jokes, and the joke here is that John lost his pipe. Or he thinks he has, but lo and behold, it is the cat, Garfield, who has it. Surprise, surprise, the cat is smoking. Again, the transition from setup to punchline takes place between the second and third panels. But make no mistake, the comic is just more than just a comic. Yes, it is funny, of course it is. It's operating at the height of sophisticated humor, on par with any of Shakespeare's piercing wit. On the other hand, Garfield the comic, John the man, humor as heart. The other hand, Garfield comic, with John the man stirring, no, riveting drama. As of everything, it is tension and release. Tension and release, a cycle. I keep returning to this idea because it is so omnipresent. Yes, you could, and yes, I've done this on more than one occasion. You could print this comic strip on a giant piece of paper. The dimensions would be something like 34 by 11 inches. Now tape the ends together with the comic facing inward. Stick your head in the middle of this Garfield comic loop and read. Start at the first panel. John's reading the newspaper. He feels for something on the end table. Second table. He reads the newspaper. He sets it down. Something ain't right. Where can my pipe be, he thinks. But then the payoff. The third panel. Garfield has John's pipe and is smoking it. Aha! The paper's in a loop around your head. So that you can see, once again, John's in a seat, reading the paper, and so on and so on and so on. You can literally read the comic strip for eternity. I spent many a relaxing Sunday afternoon reading the strip over and over. It reminded me of the Portuguese death carvings, which always begin and end with the same scrawled image. So, this idea of repetition, the beginning being the end and the end being the beginning, it's not new. It's an ageless tradition among the best storytellers humanity has ever offered. And I'm not wrong to include cartoonist Jim Davis in that exalted seat for this particular strip alone. I'm not foolish enough to deny that great art is subjective, divisive even, and that some people see this Garfield strip, they see it and they shrug with no real reaction. But I will say that I believe everyone in the world should see it. At the very least, see it. You should all see it. Read it. Spend some time with it. Spend an hour reading it. What's an hour? Yes, you could watch some television program. You could play some fast-paced video game or a computer game. Yes, you could do all those things. But it's just an hour. But if you give the strip a chance, and you look into John Arbuckle's eyes, if you look in John Arbuckle's soul, you might find that you're really looking into your own. It's self-discovery. That's what I'm talking about here. You have the opportunity, the possibility. It could change you. Don't be afraid. You know, just last week I was eating lunch near the municipal court like I do every Thursday, and there was a plumbing van parked out front, and a plumber would step out of the court and retrieve something from us every so often. A few times this happened. I thought nothing of it, just the plumber doing some work. But then he came up, looked through his van, and it was clear he couldn't find something. I noticed, and I thought, well, that's sort of similar to the Garfield comic. Someone's looking for something, can find it. But yes, that happens billions of times a day around the world. But then this plumber, he puts his hands on his hip, scratches his head, and he said out loud, "Now where could my pipe wrench be?" Well, at this, I leaped off the bench, sandwich still in hand, and I rushed over. I shouted, "What was that you said?" He looked at me and said, "What? I can't find my wrench." And he said, No, say it just like you said it. So he, begrudgingly, scratched his head and repeated, "Now where can my pipe wrench be?" I slapped him on the back and I said, "Garfield!" He looked so confused, so I said it again. And then I said, "Your orange cat took it." And then I laughed, and he smiled, and he went back into the courtroom. I walked away knowing that the plumber and I, two complete strangers, bonded over this comic. You see, life imitates art. It becomes a common ground. I have a feeling that if I see this plumber again, we'll be sharing stories like two old friends. Because we've been united by art. We have a common love for Jim Davis and his characters, his writings, the humor, the drama, that rascal Garfield the cat. Oh, and by the way, if you're wondering what I was having for lunch that day, there was a ham sandwich with an apple and potato chips in a bag. I had a soda as well. I think it's important to view the pipe strip in philosophical terms. We've touched briefly on the notion of existentialism. That theme is very prevalent in the strip. Garfield is, in fact, a modern existential anti-hero. But if Garfield embodies the bewilderment of meaningless life, what is John? What are the telltale signs that inform John's philosophical standpoint? His approach. What style of thinking does he represent? John is depicted as being grounded in a material world, a world of things. He is surrounded by objects, and he touches the objects. He interacts with them. The newspaper, the end table, the chair, his clothes, all of these physical things make up John's world. In some sense, even his cat Garfield is an object to him, a thing. The first ideology that comes to mind when thinking of objects in a tangible world is pragmatism. Is John Arbuckle a pragmatist? His belief stems from a useful, coherent view of his environment, a sort of cause and effect understanding of his world, helps him. He first A, deduces that his pipe is missing, and then B, catches his cat, Garfield, using this pipe. This kind of empirical and logical thinking leads credence to the idea that John is indeed a pragmatist, although it is hard to entirely ignore the rest of the Garfield comic canon. While Garfield is consistently anarchic and embraces the chaos and absurdity of life, John Arbuckle exhibits an erratic, unpredictable mix of philosophical behaviors. At times he is borderline delusional, an idealist, an almost slap-happy version of Don Quixote. In other moments he's rigid, nearly to the point of being obsessive, somewhat like a structuralist, and certainly has streaks of sarcasm and negativity that may classify him as a skeptic. But isn't there some sort of universal truth about this approach? How can any one man, how can John Arbuckle be just one thing? How could any of us be just one thing? We are an amalgamation of ideas, of emotions, conduits, and conducts and functions, thoughts and feelings. John may very well inhabit tenets of nearly every major philosophical tract known to man. To be honest, we all might. Characters are reduced to make them recognizable, definable. A story needs a good guy, a story needs a bad guy, but rarely is one person in real life defined in such black and white terms. Even Garfield, of all of his bad behavior, Machiavellian motivation, and a general ne'er-do-well attitude, he can be kind and thoughtful. You just have to find that rare strip. Speaking philosophically about the entire Garfield franchise, it's an incredibly accurate depiction of life. Its bold lines and bright colors are merely a facade, a red herring, a lie. This cartoon isn't a cartoon at all. It's not a caricature. It's not a caricature despite adopting caricature as its visual style and tone. But I don't really like to speak in broad sweeping generalizations about Garfield. The comic has been running for well over 30 years, and to try to boil it down to just one thing, it's just impossible. I think the only way that any historian worth the salt will agree with me is to look at individual moments, isolated instances, single comic strips. Can I discuss this one strip in the context of the entire run of Garfield? Yes, I do that just as a film historian might analyze one movie in relation to the history of movies, or a war enthusiast may look at a single battle's impact on an entire war. The pipe strip isn't just an instance of the lives of John and Garfield. That's all it is, really. Perhaps John is not a pragmatist at all. Let's look at this again. Maybe John is exhibiting the traits of a rationalist thinker. This question, now where can my pipe be, is a clue that his thought process stems from the early rationalist question posed by René Descartes. The well-known quote, "I think, therefore I am," attributed to Descartes, is applicable. Another close look at the strip, and we see that Jim Davis chose to draw John thinking this question. John doesn't even say this question aloud. So Jim's also exploring the mind-body duality. John's question operates on a level of a literal question, but it also examines the nature of reality. Jim Davis's epistemological approach tells us something about the human condition. John's thoughts remain the focal point of the strip. The comic is, quite literally, centered around his thought. Now, where could my pipe be? This is his reality. This is where cognition and the power and function of the mind takes over. As Plato believed, the body is just a shell for John Arbuckle. Yes, he can use his physical body to read his paper or to cross his legs, but these inputs of touch, sight, hearing, and etc., these senses are the triggers of the mind. As we see here, the mind is something greater. It is the originator of ideas, and ideas are forever immortal. Immortality through thought is a major theme in literature and philosophy. Isn't that what Mr. Jim Davis himself has achieved? Will he live forever? the universe will continue to spread and spread outward, and entropy will turn a chaotic infinity into a homogeneous controlled system. This will take billions of years, and in that time humans will push technology to heights we can't imagine quite yet. We'll explore and inhabit space, and occupy more and more of the universe just as time allowed our ancestors to multiply in numbers and populate more and more of the earth. And as the specific people come and go, their physical bodies will be born, grow, and die, but their thoughts remain. In Jim Davis's comics, his glorious Garfield comics are recorded ideas of his that will still be here, even when the Earth is no longer inhabitable. And humanity has long since moved away to bigger planets. They'll carry with them a record we all keep. Mark my words, and we will look at what we've started. What is the internet? What is the online world if not a record? Never-ending feed of ideas, immortal ideas, forever placed in the ether of dualism. What is an idea? Where does it live? How does it manifest itself? Can it live forever? Will it live forever outside these physical husks of ours and our bodies? John Arbuckle and Garfield started merely as thoughts, but now they've become so much more that old cliche rings true. They've taken on a life of their own, and life may not be what we think. Life brings to mind a beating heart, breathing lungs, blinking eyes, but the real life is in our imaginations. And who better embodies the definition of imagination if not a simple man, a cartoonist, who puts his ideas to paper so that they may live on, so that our children and our children's children and their children's children's children can access the wealth of ideas that have accumulated this far. They will plug themselves into an information grid, and they will have access. They will read every Garfield comic 80,000 years from now. A child will see a simple John Arbuckle reading a newspaper. He will feel around for something, but that something isn't there. He will lift his head and think, now where could my pipe be? Then Garfield will be smoking the pipe and John will yell, Garfield! What then, 80,000 years from now? The child reading this comic will smile. And that smile will transcend time and space and time, and the physical limitations of this existence, whatever they may be, however many dimensions exist, there will always be Garfield. There will always be its creator, Jim Davis. And I would like to end this with a quote by another famous writer. It is through art only, that we can realize our perfection. Oscar Wilde.